Well, my name is Alan Nunns, but better known by everybody in my life as Barney. And Barney Google was, I guess, one of the songs in those days, so that's where it originated. So I was born in Cumberland, which is a coal mining town on Vancouver Island, and my dad was in charge of the railway there, and I used to hang around on weekends with the dad when they were still working on Sundays and Saturdays, and I would, go out in the train, and all the crews on the trains knew me as a kid growing up, so I had a good life there. And when the war came along, I took advantage of going overseas. And Cumberland was a coal mining town, as I mentioned earlier, and the people were of all. There was Italian, black people, white people, of every kind, every shore in that town those days. A normal day wasn't very good. I didn't like high school very much, but as I say, I was a leader. We were being treated like children, so we decided to go out and strike, all the fellows, and I was ordered to, I was one of the instigators of it, I guess. And I remember after we got home that night, my dad came roaring to my house, or to our house, and said, "What the hell have you been doing?" And I said, "Well, I was doing nothing very much. I just had a little fun at school." So we ended up having he said, "Well, you got to report to me, to the people that run the city hall. In the city hall, I have a meeting," he says, "and you're called to it." So I said, "Well, I haven't done anything." And I just told him what it was. And he says, "Well, the school board has asked that you come." I didn't know what it was all about. So anyway, we went in there and they had this meeting, and they talked to me about it, and a couple of other people as well. And the next thing I know, I was suspended from school for 5 days. I couldn't believe it. So I didn't worry too much about it, because I went down to the local local hardware store, and I fixed bicycles for the whole 3 days or 4 days that I was off. But it was a ridiculous thing, and it could have been solved without any problems. But they treated us like kids, and after that, they learned a lesson. I guess they didn't realize what they were doing, that we were old enough to look after ourselves and go up to school and be active without interfering with the younger children. So that's my story so far there. Troublemaker. We had this problem at the school, but that was finally settled, and then I went through high school, of course, after that. And when I graduated, the war had come along, and I had a choice of going to the Air Force or the Navy or whatever. And I wasn't going to be told where to go. I wanted to go where I wanted. And so I joined the Air Force, and I went to Vancouver Technical School for about 6 months, and was taught to do code and radio equipment and that kind of stuff. As it turns out, when the war was on, all the code we learned never had to use it, because it was all more modern by the time we got finished here. When the war came along, they were short of people working in the fire department, so I immediately joined the fire department, even though I was a youngster. They were accepting us to go in and help. So whenever the fire whistle blew, usually at night when you're sleeping, you'd have to get up and run to the fire hall, and my dad would laugh at me after the first time, because we had to go to a farm about 5 miles out of town, and it was the middle of winter, and we were laying on top of the hoses on the fire truck, trying to, when we got to the farm yard where the fire was, we stepped out, and I immediately got onto an ice pack, and I went down to water up to my waist, which is something. Then I got home that night, my dad was sitting there laughing at me. He says, "That'll teach you to go when the fire whistle blows. You go later." Part of living in Cumberland was a great town, and the kids we had Japanese, of course, were all there for the time that they were allowed to, and then they were shipped out of Vancouver. And I remember going down to down to the station where they took them on the train and shipped them by boat. It was a terrible way they was handled, and a lot of them did very well after that. Some of them went to Toronto, and some of them went different places back east. And the ones in Toronto, 2 or 3 of them became doctors. Amazing how they survived and they got along like that. And after the war, they were great. And then I haven't ever seen any of them again. They shipped off and left, as I say, to different cities across Canada where they had their lives. So. I went to school with all these kids, yeah. And I remember going down there before I joined the Air Force and see them go off on the train, but taking they were kids. They were great kids. They just didn't understand what was going on. A lot of them were young, but they all ended up. Most of them I ever heard of later, all ended up pretty good jobs. A couple of them were doctors. Went to Toronto and they became doctors. I know they're down there now. But you didn't know in those days. It was, and the way the government handled it was terrible. But that's politics in those days. But occasionally I've run into 1 or 2 of them because the Chinese and the Japanese they have associations here now that we all sometimes get together with them. Particularly the Hong Kong veterans, or see them. Some of them, a few that are left. So when the war came along, of course, I had the choice of deciding where I wanted to go. I could go in the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, and I wasn't happy about being on ships. I thought, well, I'll join the Air Force, so I became a wireless operator and a wireless mechanic. And during the war, of course, we found out that they were supposed to have, our planes were supposed to be all loaded with East Indians to unload the supplies that we were carrying, and they never showed up at our airport. They were busy fighting fighting the war below, I guess, and so we ended up, some of us became kickers, which was never known in the Air Force before. And our job was to tie a rope around our waist, and you flew with the door open, and you kicked the supplies out if we were parachuting stuff. It was supply, and parachutes were they were attached to parachutes, or if we could land, we landed and unloaded the stuff. So we became kickers, and we got extra pay for all this. So, but it doesn't even exist today. They have regular people that do this and unload all the planes. And as I mentioned earlier, I think we had a rope tied around our waist and flew the door out, and you got your feet up like this and you kicked. Stuff was either parachuted out or went that way. If we could land, we landed, depending. So we got extra pay for that, of course. So. And that went on, of course. We were stationed in England, and then we went from England we knew we were going to tropical place because we were given tropical shots. And we were then ordered, there was 7 aircraft taking us, and we were told, we were there to get on the planes, and we were taken off with 3 other fellows and told to go back to London for the weekend and come back on Monday. And out of those planes that were there, one of them was shot down with a whole load of our guys in it. We never did hear till after the war where they found them, but somewhere in Germany. But why they were there, we don't know. In Germany, our planes were supposed to fly south of and go around by Spain and that way, but somehow they got lost and flew over Germany, and that's, as I say, was where it was found. They were found. It was an interesting life, and in Burma, then we trained in northern India, so we had to learn which squadron we were going to be attached to. So we did a lot of night flying and that kind of stuff, and I was picked to go to 436 Squadron. So there was 2 squadrons altogether, 435 and 436. And in the war, we ended up being about 500 miles apart, so we never saw one another very often. And India was very interesting. We trained, as I say, in northern India, and then we were shipped off to Burma. When we flew there, I was with the first group that flying there, and we landed on what was to be our airport. When we got it there was nothing. It was just an empty field and so we had to unload all our supplies, and it took us about 4 days to set up tents, and we just didn't do anything. Everybody, even this commanding officer and everybody was working. So I have some photographs of us, and it really looks stupid, but anyway, we survived that and started flying after 3 days, and we were carrying supplies, and we became these kickers because nobody showed up to unload the planes, and that's how we ended up in the war as a kicker and a wireless operator. So. It was quite different than what the rest of the Air Force did, but they were in Bomber Command. We had no guns on our planes. We were carrying supplies, and that's all we did was drop supplies or landed and unloaded the supplies. So no armaments. We all had pistols and that kind of thing, but Sten guns. But, that was all you carried on you had it strapped to you. DC-3 Dakota, yeah. DC-3 Dakota. Best aircraft they ever made. I'd go anywhere in it. And I've done everywhere. We flew all the way back. We flew from England over, and we flew back with them too, so it took us 4 days to get back to England. Remember going to the telegraph office and sending a cable to my mother to say we were back in England. We couldn't tell them where we were, but they figured it out to some of the letters we wrote. Of course, every letter we wrote had to be checked out by somebody else before it went. But life was interesting, and you saw a lot of the country, and you were flying all the time, so you had lots of hours, extra money. But it was interesting, and with the two squadrons so far apart, we just occasionally met up and had some leave together at different times. We'd go into Calcutta, or we'd go into other places like that for proper leave and have a place where we could swim. But the officer was quite interesting because they had a big place there where the officers could go, but I wasn't an officer, I was just an ordinary airman, so I had to sit outside and watch the guys eating all their food. But we were well looked after. We stayed in old hotels. And after the war, we took our wives back there and visited all these places that we had been in. We flew, and then we moved 3 or 4 times to different islands, wherever the ships could come in with supplies, and we would unload them and fly them from there. And of course, we had several nights at different places where the Japanese came over and paid us a tune, dropped a few supplies. I hope you're cutting some of this off. Yeah, it was interesting for a young guy. I was 18 years of age, and I was with the Air Force for 3.5 years, so. And Burma for 4 years, for 2.5 years. So it was nice to come back to England, and then we flew back from Burma to India, back to England, I should say. And we ended up having a couple of weeks off in England, and then came across the Atlantic. As we did at the beginning, we went over on a cruise ship, and came back on a ship. So. And we're happy to land in Canada and see the welcome we got at all the various cities as we were coming home, and particularly the one in Vancouver where we landed here. My family was all there, everybody. You know, the thing you don't, you forget them now, but a lot of things you remember about them, but trying to put them all together is not easy anymore. We landed in Halifax, and we had trained right across the country. Yeah, it was interesting too, but people were out at every place we came to see the guys and wave with them, and yeah. It's like when we went to England, we had gum and cigarettes and Ellis, and the kids are in Scotland. We're standing there waiting for us. We were throwing the candy out and everything, cigarettes. Chum, any gum, chum? But that's our life, and it was very, very primitive in a lot of ways. We always slept in tents. We never got out of tents the whole time we were out there. 4 guys to a tent. We became great friends. And I guess of all the guys, we had a reunion. I started the instigator of having reunions after the war in Canada, and with some fellows from Toronto. We had Vancouver. I organized a starting reunion after we got home. First year we were back, we came to Vancouver and had a reunion, and then we found out that the guys in Toronto were doing the same thing. So we ended up, after 2 years, we merged it. And so we'd go to Toronto 1 year, or Halifax the next, or British Columbia the next. And we went a number of times. We went up to the Harrison Lake, Vancouver area, and always had some great reunions there. They come from right across Canada to attend them. And we did it for nearly 50 years, but suddenly there's very few of us left. So, I can't tell you how many, but I would say, as far as my squadron is concerned, probably the most would be 25 that are left. And some of them aren't able to get out even, But we all slept 4 to a tent, but the COO was right across the next tent to me a couple of times, He was with, and they had very little entertainment out there. And one of the things our guys did, including myself, we decided to have a party. So a lot of the guys got dressed up in women's clothes, and we had a wonderful time. I got some photographs of that somewhere there. I don't know if you've seen them or not. I think they're in that book that I showed you, the guys dressed up. And that was our entertainment most of the time. Very primitive, but, anytime we get a chance for a party, we'd have it. Because we got very little to drink. We occasionally had the beer ration, but that was it. Anyway, it's a life you can't forget. There's so many things I could say that they just, my mind doesn't work the way it used to. Anyway, I enjoyed it. I'm glad I didn't join the Navy or the Army. I felt the Air Force was what I wanted, and certainly it worked out that way. And I think the big thing was the friendship we built. When you're, most of the time it was same 4 guys to a tent, but we moved, I guess, maybe 25 or 30 times, so you were always sleeping in tents. Biggest problem was the living. That was really rough, and you had a lot of bugs you caught and different things, and you had to be in the medical office quite regularly, and I look back and it was great. You think it was, but at that time, sometimes you wouldn't believe that. Particularly when we first moved into India, or into Burma, it was something, we were in India, and then we had to move into Burma. And we got the first place, and of course to get there and find that there was none of the facilities were built at all. They were just some airfield there, and we had to build our own facility. So, you know, it was good. Anyway, big experience. But, you know, most of the guys are gone. I'm lucky to still be here. And I guess I was known as the kid in our squadron, so I guess I was the youngest in the group to start with. But it's a memory that you'll never forget, but trying to explain it to somebody and make sense of it doesn't probably go over as well as you want. But anyway, we hear from one another occasionally. There's a few that are left. And Bob Farkas is for a good friend of mine in Toronto, or outside of Toronto, and he has written this book that I gave you a copy of earlier. And so when one of the books is my picture happens to be on the front of it, how come, I don't know. I remember the day and that incident that occurred that day after we'd had, the guy took our pictures. We were standing on the side of a pagoda, and there was a bunch of buildings nearby, and they were all burned and looked like they'd been fired badly. But anyway, we were wandering around, and I looked into the one little place there on the floor, and I found this ornament here, which is out of one of the native, not churches, but, and this was sitting there on a burned out floor, burned out house, and this was sitting there with a, so I picked it up and threw it in my pocket, and that's where I ended up bringing it home, and it sits in my room. Well, every day I look at it and wonder about it, who it might have belonged to, or what religion it was. But here, this was sitting on the floor right where I was standing. No people, none of the natives around. Just the whole place had been abandoned, you know. And here it was sitting there, so I just picked it up, put it in my pocket, and I carried it ever since. And it sits in my room right now. As far as the Burma campaign, there was very few Canadians that served in it. There's just the two big squatters and then individual members of different parts of the Army or Navy that were serving with others, you know, as well. But we didn't see many of them, but we did have, we got these medals after the war. They didn't, but these were different medals that were awarded to us. The Burma Star right here, which we honor very much. And this is the 2935, well, what year? Can't remember the year. Anyway, and these were the British Columbia Medal and the Federal. I got the first and second medals for everything. One of the things that we didn't, we were never honored about, we served in Burma. Well, we're so few Canadians served, we all got the regular medal that we're entitled to. And this came along 3 or 4 years ago. They realized that they hadn't given any to the Burma veterans especially. So this is the medal that was presented, and it's the Knightly Order of St. George, which I'd never heard about. And there was about 50 or 60 of us all received it in Ottawa. We were down there for a special part, and there it is. So I can wear that if I want when I'm a parade or whatever it is, but very few of them around. So. And of course, these are the regular medals that we got. And this medal is, you know, a different field altogether, in that I've been a Freemason. Last month they had a big do for me. 70 years I've been a Mason in British Columbia, the oldest. They're still alive in BC. So this is a medal that I was presented for the 70 years. I'm now 71 years, actually. So anyway, I'm proud of it and happy to have it, although it still says 60. They haven't given me a new. Well, it's supposedly a secret society, but it's not. really secret. You can find out about it anywhere you want to read. You know, you're invited to belong, and you're certainly investigated by other members to make sure you're the person that they want. And you have a ritual you go through, and you have to remember a lot of it. You have memory work. And my grandfather was a minister, but also a mason in Ireland. And my dad was a mason in Cumberland on Vancouver Island when they moved out to Canada. And my uncle was a minister in Victoria, archdeacon in the Anglican Church, and he was a mason. And so it was all ingrained in my family. And then I got to know a lot of them here in Vancouver, and I decided, and I'm now, or this year, I got an award that says that I've had 71 years. You know, mostly they kick off at this age, but I'm still here. So I don't know how much time I've got, but hopefully a little bit. Back in the school days, of course, I have this photograph here of our Cumberland High School. And this was in 1939. And we won the Dominion Championship for St. John's Ambulance First Aid. And actually, this photograph was our instructor here. He's a local gentleman that lived in the town. And these were kids that I grew up with. So, I'm trying to remember all of them, but Bill Nicholas is one, and Jackie Short, and he was shot down overseas. I saw him in Montreal on the way through. He was going over, and I met him, and we had lunch together in Montreal. And then he took off, and they went over, and he was shot down in the first month he was over there. I knew all his family very well, and this is my friend Tom Scott, whose father and mother were great friends of mine. And Trevor Jones here, and as I say, our instructor. And the medals we won for the Dominion Championship. It says Provincial Championship, Cumberland Junior High School. First aid, St. John's Ambulance. So I keep that close by. You know, you all learned in Cumberland, a coal mining town, first aid was one of the important things in the town. Well, we weren't fighting the Japanese in the sense that we didn't have any guns. But we were making sure that our army down below was getting food and ammunition. And if we could land, we landed. If we couldn't land, it went out by parachute. And as I say, we did this door that you got your kicker with a rope around your neck or around your waist, and you got your stuff was all in boxes and the parachutes or whatever. They'd open after you kicked them out. And if you could land, you landed and unloaded the stuff. So depend. If there was an airfield available or somewhere where you had to be able to land. If you don't, it went out by parachute. You know, the Japanese got much of it as we did. You know, they were on one side and we were on the other, shooting ducks really, because we didn't carry any guns other than pistols. You know, we had no ammunition on the planes, so we're just lucky that we lost quite a few, and we found some of the bodies later. That's all history now, but we were a tight-knit bunch of fellows. We were stuck together like glue. We did till 3 years ago. We were stuck together like glue because we knew there were no other there was individual Canadians serving in the RAF, but we were RCAF, and we didn't do much flying with the RAF. They were mostly, a lot of them were in Europe, and a lot of them were in various other places in the world. But we were only sent to Burma, and that was the representative, our good friend that's, they're talking about shooting not Mackenzie King, what's his name, picture of him in my room there, Sir John A. Macdonald. They're talking about getting rid of his picture. Here I've got it sitting in my living room. It was a lot of old history too. I just don't. This was a medal that they didn't give us anything for all that, and then they suddenly, 4 years ago or so it was, we were presented with this. There's very few of them. There's very few of us left at the time. But that's what it is, and anybody I know around here has never seen it before, because I'm probably one of the few that, it was, I suppose, 50 of us altogether from across Canada got it. That's all there are left of us, or was at that time. It's Knightly Order of St. George, it's called. And when I was in parade here for the Veterans Day, I had it around my neck. And of course, the Burma, I worked very hard on the reunions after the war, and two of those medals are, for the work. A number of us got them for the work we did. Well, they found out that they hadn't given anything to the Hong Kong veterans. They didn't get any proper awards, and we happened to be the only Canadians that had anything in touch with their survival, as we were parachuting food to help them and feed the army that was fighting them. So because of that, I guess they decided they better put this out. We didn't know anything about it. As I say, we went to Ottawa, and suddenly we were all asked to appear in a big dining room, and they called us all, and we thought we were going, it was a great party. We had enjoyed ourselves, and then to get presented with that at the same time was, they paid our way down and back. I had to take somebody as a helper. Every one of us had to take my cousin, he went with me. As you get older, they want to make sure your health is okay. So, thanks to you guys and the government. The only way we knew where we were going is we went to England, but before we left, we were given tropical shots. So we knew that was, we weren't going to be staying in England very long. And so we didn't, and it was part of the British Empire at those days, so we were the only Canadians units serving. There was individual Canadians serving with the RAF, and with the RAF and RCAF are quite different as far as we're concerned. If you were RCAF, you were under British command. We were under all Canadian command. So. Burma wasn't so bad because we were set up in tents right away. But once we left left India into Burma, I reversed it all. We had to set up our own tents, and I think one of the photographs I got, it's not there. It shows us setting up one of the tents. My picture's in there, and a picture on here. Well, this is a picture of most of our ground crew guys and air crew, but some of them were flying and when this was taken. But this is one of our squadron, one of our aircraft, and as a matter of fact, I pointed out where I happened to be, and see how few clothes we were. We were just called in to make a picture one day. And these are some of the officers in charge, and these three of these fellows bailed out one night. They just didn't know they were going to get them back, but they got them back the next day. This is the kind of aircraft we flew, and Dakotas, DC-3s, flew with the door out. Not in this case, but. And that's a picture of us parachuting. We parachuted food or ammunition if we couldn't land, or if we could land, and we unloaded the stuff just like anybody. We all pitched in. And this is where we first got into Burma. This is our first week we got there, and we landed in there, and there was no people to unload our planes or do anything. So there's a photograph here of us starting to assemble everything out of the aircraft and get ready to fix. That happens to be a picture of me right there. And we ended up building, fixing up tents, and spent about 3 or 4 days doing that before we were able to do any flying. And this is one of the jobs I had as a kicker. You flew with the door out, you had a rope tied around on a static line down the center of the plane, and you were attached to it, and you had the door out. That's not a very good picture of the door at the moment. You can see the supplies below, and you kick the stuff out. If you didn't go with it. This is interesting. It gives us an idea. And these first week we were there, the commanding officer and 3 of his men got lost, and they had to bail out. And the CO was the last to bail out. This is him in the center. And this is the guys that, they all landed in the river. They found one another in the next day. And the the head general was down to present them, to welcome them and look after them. And the commanding officer of the airfield was right there. And one of the things we had we didn't have very good facilities for washing and everything, so we usually ended up by a river or something, and this is a picture of our guys swimming in a chong, we call it a chong, on the Akab Island. And you can see how well we were dressed. And this is over Mandalay, the road to Mandalay, as we called it in those days. Anyway, this is our big supply drop over there, and these are the Army below, and some of our guys are, if we could fly, we dropped the stuff, and then we ended up having our pictures taken, some of us. I wasn't in on that drop. This is a Japanese flag that one of the guys got a hold of. My buddy Johnny Cleaves died, no longer alive, but he and I were great buddies, and we found a Japanese flag. So, and you can see the tents in the background. That's how we lived. This is some of the officers. You had to dig a slit trench beside your tents as well. So this is watching out to see what's going to happen. This is one of the airfields. We were in second airfield. We were in Ramree Island. You can see all the water in the runways. We were in the middle of the monsoons in those days. So. And one of the guys was quite a cartoonist, so he showed us with the aircraft, and with a boat or a plane we had to call Watchbird, and it used to go out every morning early, check the weather conditions. This is just a cartoon they made of one of the watchbirds. And then our entertainment was terrible. We never had any movies at all, or very seldom. So the guys decided to have a group. They were all dressed up as ladies and everything else, and it was called Monsoon Follies. And this is a picture of some of the fellows. They're all dressed as women. Great life in those days. we had a big victory loan day, and we collected $130,000 in those days. So, you know, we were being paid. Nobody had the use of money. We know where to spend it. So you can see our tents in the background, and that's a picture or a thing we put up to show what we'd won. And this is on VJ Day when we heard the war was over. You can see we're in the church, one of the small churches they had there. We always had a church of different religions. And this is when we heard the war was over, they had a nice service after, which I'm in there somewhere. I guess that's it. Well, they had a band there. The guys, we always had a band, and they just played different songs that we all knew in those days, like, you know, and what the followed, you know, that's only a few of them. A lot of them were, you know, we did it 2 or 3 nights to show guys what it was all about. Well, there's 2 of them that I went to school with.
Really?
Yeah, and in Cumberland, Comox, there were 3 or 4 of us. We didn't know until we formed up these squadrons. And I was a Cumberland boy, and there was a couple of Courtney boys in that picture. I could have gone back to Cumberland in the coal mining town, and they had a job for me working in the coal mine, but I had worked for a few months, and my dad ran the railway, so I had a job there to go back to attached to the coal mine, but I didn't want to go back to that life. You know, if something happened, you had to go down below in the mine and get the motor out of it or whatever was going wrong, because I was in electrical end at that time. We fitted in damn well in a hurry. You know, coming back to Vancouver and getting off the train, the train was all Canadians on the train, and, you know, you came across Canada, and, you know, everybody was out, every train. So it was quite a welcome. We landed in Scotland, and when we back to England, and God, the kids, thousands of kids, any gum chum we were throwing, this is when we went over, throwing stuff to them. Nothing, really. Well, I shouldn't say that, but we were dropping supplies to feed people as well as Army. But we never had much connection with them. You know, we had our own airfields, and the Army was, we'd fly over them or with them, but where they were. If we could land, we landed. If we couldn't land, so that was your contact with them. Well, you don't have much choice. I mean, you know, I didn't know whether I was going to be in Europe or going to be, you know, the only thing that made me realize that when I was stationed, I went to wireless school in Vancouver, and I went to Montreal and had it, and I was shipped back to Vancouver again. And that's when I met, oh, that's another story. I'm losing track of what I was saying. We came back to, when we were sent home on leave, and then we knew we were going to go somewhere because we had tropical shots. So, but they wouldn't tell you anything about where you were going or what you were going to do, but we assumed that we were going to be more than England because of the shots we had. And other than that, you know, several of my buddies were killed. Oh, quite a few of them were killed overseas, not with my squadron, but with it. And one of the guys he's not in that picture, but he joined the Air Force, and we went to school together, and he came, going through Montreal, he knew that I was going to be on the plane, or on the train, I should say, and I got a hold of him. We stopped and had lunch. The train stopped in Montreal, and we had lunch together, and I said goodbye to him, and I was the last guy of the family. You know, I saw him, and he was shot down shortly after. Anyway, we were very lucky. We didn't lose too many people. We had a number of crashes, lots of crashes, but could land or something, and people were hospitalized, but I stayed on the good planes, I guess. I don't know. I was only a mechanic, really. That's what was my job, and but you had all the flying you wanted. You were sitting on your butt when the planes were all out, unless there's some maintenance to do, and we had a full maintenance crew, so you could always find somebody who would take your shift or something if you wanted to go off with one of the guys. So, yeah, which was very unusual. They never did that before, but they had to have people. We got to the airfield expecting to see people coming and help unload the planes. Nobody, just the crews that we were with. We did all loading and unloading of our own equipment, putting up our own tents, and of course we never were out of tents the whole time we were there, except when we got leave and went into Calcutta or something like that. As far as I'm concerned, first class. I'm glad they did. What the hell? Sure, we killed thousands of people, but the Japanese asked for it. I mean, and they're certainly a thriving company now, or group worldwide, and they weren't going to hold anything back to on us if we lost a number of planes, and they weren't from anything but Japanese. So, or sometimes crashes occurred caused by yourselves. Sometimes, airport right on the airstrips. Sometimes landing, or you never knew where you might going to land. If you could land, you landed, but if you couldn't, you parachuted stuff or unloaded it. But it was quite a heavy job. But that didn't mind me in those days. But no, I had a lot of good Japanese friends at school. We went to Cumberland, was a coal mining town on the island, and the Japanese were there in the mines, and it had been originally. They were kicked out, but then my dad ran the railway, and he hired a lot of these guys that couldn't work in the mines. The Chinese, particularly too. Well, it was interesting because I was not a commissioned officer, and we got to this Canada House, and they wouldn't let us in. Just officers, and I was not an officer. I was just an airman. Sergeant, I ended up with as a sergeant, or would have if the war hadn't ended. But anyway, ended up. So in Calcutta, we were. That brings me another thing I'll tell you about. The Calcutta, they had a big swimming pool there, and we had another area we could go and swim. But this was, in those days the officers learned a lesson in the later days. They kept up with us because we were a very important part to them, and despite the fact that we weren't commissioned officers. I remember going to a little store next to one of the places in Calcutta, and I saw a watch I wanted to buy, so I bought this watch and took it home with me. And I had the invoice that the guy had given me when I'd had it. And so when I was going back to India for a trip, I've been 3 times back after the war with our wives, this little guy was still in the shop at this place, so I walked in and handed him my bill that he didn't take away from me. And he looked at me and he couldn't believe I was looking for my watch. And of course, I'd had it 5 years before. He was shocked, but anyway, he found out in a hurry. And he was still running this little shop with a tent over him, selling watches. And we used to went into Calcutta on leave, and of course Calcutta is a big city in those days even. And we used to go during the war. We went into this Furple's restaurant. It was a beautiful place where you could sing, dance with the girls. You know, they had music and dancing, and this was all great for us. So we go back after the war with our wives, and we said, now we're going to take you to all the Furple's restaurant to see where we used to, you know, have a dancing in this. And we said we're going to have a dinner there too, so it was all set up. We walk into we got out of the hotel we were in, and the natives were hanging onto the women and everything, trying to, you know, get money from us, because it's only a block away, but that's the way they are down there, or were in those days. And we ended up going into the door of this restaurant, and my God, it was just a big beer hall. There was beer bottles all over the place. This was this beautiful Furple's restaurant that we had gone dancing with, and we had to get out of there in a hurry again. So it was the way it was. Oh yeah. Well,
yeah.
Well, I met her. Well, she was a war widow with 2 kids, and we ended up. I found out she was, you know, she was on her own upon her husband being killed, and I had been introduced to her, and I thought, well, she's very nice, and so we talked about different things, and I decided I'd come and help her, you know. So I put in a garden, and I put in trees, and I put in painted the house, and I put on built a garage. And then after about 2 years, year and a half, of going out with her and taking her out, we decided to get married. So we got married in this little hotel right down here now. That's a big hotel right on the waterfront here in West Vancouver called St. Ma's. We used to be called St. Ma's Hotel, but it's now the big restaurant where you walk out onto the. Have you been down to the waterfront here? Onto that pier that's out there? Well, that was called the St. Ma's Hotel when I married, and that's where we were married in there, and it was just a little tiny hotel. We lived, you know, she owned the house, I was helping her build it. I didn't, you know, when I met her, so I just volunteered and put in the garden and ended up marrying her. But the unfortunate part was I never had any, she had 2 children, but she politely told me the night I got married to her that she couldn't have any more kids. Kind of shocked me, but we went ahead with it. And we had a good life, but she had a lot of health problems after that. She ended up with Parkinson's disease. She was shaking and shivering, and it's a terrible thing. Anyway, she passed away from that. Then I remarried again after that, and of course it was too late. You know, I raised her kids. They went to school and high school while I was still there. And then she died after that, and then I remarried again. And of course, it was kind of late to have any children for her, you know, the wife I married. So she was a little, I'm older, I was older than her too. But anyway, that's been my life. So I've had the odd girlfriend here and there. Occasionally I go out with a girl's hair, but or we have dinner together, that kind of thing. When she was in the latter part of her health in the hospital, I met another lady, but I didn't marry her at the time, but they had 2 kids that I raised. They decided they didn't want to see me anymore. You know, I missed them. They were good kids. I raised them. I never gave them any reason to feel, but because I had met somebody else at the time, and I knew she wasn't going to. She knew she wasn't coming out too. That's what happened, and you know, those are things that, you know, you'll regret them in a lot of ways, and you don't regret them. I mean, I've had a happy marriage afterwards, but it was, you know, not easy. And of course, the daughter of the lady I married to, I mean, she's my daughter as far as I'm concerned too, because I hadn't any kids from the first one, and I wouldn't have any for this lady, but she has a daughter who's coming out to have Christmas with me. She lives in Victoria. So I'm blank as far as family is concerned. I'm the end of the line. Yeah, I still have lots of, well, cousins and that kind of stuff that I can claim through marriage.
Right.
Yeah, you know, my health is pretty good. I got problems walking a bit now, and I have a pacemaker in here, which saved my life. If I'd have been in here, I had 20 minutes to be worked on it. They didn't have the facility here. I happened to be in the hospital for some minor thing that day, and they hooked me up to a machine, and so I have a pacemaker right there, and I touch it every day to make sure it's still there. And I end up, every 6 months I go, and I go in a couple of weeks to have it checked over. You just put a machine attached to you and then go home. No, you can finish it all right there.
Right.
So, I don't know, I'm lucky. You know, I've been lucky most of my life, quite honestly. I never got hurt or injured in the Air Force. I could have been a number of guys we lost, and you know, and I had my car for years, but I just decided last month to give it up. You know, I was feeling I was comfortable driving, so I thought, well, time to quit. Well, I belong to the Legion, which I have, but I'm the only one of my squadron that's in that Legion at the moment, the West Vancouver Legion. I belong to it ever since the war, I guess. But I don't go very often. They gave me an award. My picture's down there with a whole bunch of pictures of guys, and I'm on that veterans list. But you know, I'm supposed to go tonight or tomorrow, I think it is. I don't venture. You know, I've been through the chairs and some of these things. I know what it's all about. And at my age, I just, you know, I keep my membership out, pay my bill, you know, whatever I'm owed every time, and go once in a while, and that's it. You know, Legions have changed a lot. Most of the people in there are not veterans anymore. They're people that want to party and that kind of stuff. Well, I think my partying days are not what they used to be. Oh, I like a drink. I usually have a good drink every night, a scotch, or if I'm having dinner with 2 or 3 people, I get a bottle of wine, you know. Well, think about where we were and things that, well, I don't march anymore. I used to march up from the Legion but I don't, my legs don't give me that well. And I end up, you know, getting a ride down there, and then we always put the veterans in a special place at the cenotaph. And this year I was asked to present a wreath, which I did, and then had to walk back to my place where everybody was, and there was a number of guys who were doing that, so we all ended up in the same, you know, doing the same thing, the Legion of, well, I honor the guys that are in it, but very few march anymore. So that's the story as far as the Legion. I like it, but I don't want to be bothered going down there. There's a lot of guys that all they're doing is drinking down there, which is, it's an open bar, and I don't, you know, I like a drink at night, and that's it, so. And the COs out there, it didn't matter what your rank was, you're all buddies together. And as I say, the CO's tent several times was just next door to me, practically. You know, and he was out doing his laundry, same as I was. So those kind of things, we ended up running a great bunch of guys that got along so well and after the war. Camaraderie, we should sit and talk about it and laugh about it and not cry about it particularly, but it was something that we all lost some friends, you know. I'm still here, hopefully after a little while longer. Could have gone to university.
But you chose not to.
I wasn't a student, you know. I graduated from high school and that was it. I went to work, and I went to work for the Vancouver. First job I had, the first day I was interviewed, I was hired by the Vancouver Sun newspaper, and I was in the business office. And at that time, shortly after there, I was there. I knew the top people running it. I was in their business office there, and the province newspaper went on strike across the street. So I was in the cash cage working in the cash cage at the Sun office, and we had all this money. People wanted to buy newspapers because the province was out in strike. So the money was coming there in bundles, and I was carrying it, packing it in meat packages. It looked like meat packages, and I was walking past all the strikers out in the street. If they ever knew what was in these packages, I'd walk up to the bank up at Granville and Hastings. It was amazing how nobody took down to what I was doing, but they didn't pay any attention to me. They were too busy striking. So I worked at the Sun for, I guess, 2 or 3 years, and then somebody, there wasn't much chance of more promotion, and I wasn't a newspaper guy particularly, so I ended up, a friend of mine told me about an insurance and job in the insurance business. And I had been boarding with he and his wife, and he was in the office downtown, and he told me about this job, and so I went to the Vancouver Sun. Well, I told you about that part of it, Sun newspaper, but anyway, I ended up deciding to go into insurance business, and I ended up by buying a good friend of mine out. He was retiring, and he had a small business. So I took his business over, and I had a lot of clients that were giving me business on the side, and I was putting it with this chap anyway. So I ended up owning a business and getting licensed, and I had my own business, and I had a staff of about, I guess, not very much, about 8, 9, and this young fellow bought it out when I wanted to retire after 50. I was about 50 years altogether in it. Different parts of the insurance business. I worked for an insurance company as such, and you were learning how to underwrite and risk management and that kind of stuff, and I could do this myself, so I ended up buying this fellow's insurance agency, which is selling insurance, and I ended up, he retired, and these people were working up to, as I say, a few people, and then I ended up getting out and selling the business to him, and I had a delayed payment. He was paying me back in 2 years or something, but I had an option to get out if I wanted to. Well, after he took it over, he got, I don't know, he had 2 yachts, he had big cars. He was not, he was bringing business in, but he couldn't keep up with it. He couldn't pay it, and I could see it. I didn't like it. So I said I want out. So he went broke. I said, that's it. He couldn't handle it himself, and he had a lot more business than I had, but he was another guy with him, and they were dead loss as far as I'm concerned. And he disappeared. I've never seen him since. He owed over $1 million to one of the insurance companies, and I ended up getting, as I say, he took off, and I don't know if he's alive or not. But I enjoyed that business. I had a lot of training in it, 70-odd years in it, so. Oh, it'd be about 10 years now, but we went 3 or 4 times, 3 times anyway with the wives, go to different places where we'd been stationed. And, it was began to see life as it was really before the war came along. And Burma was a very interesting country in those days, and it still is, I think, but Myanmar and all. But, I have no regrets about the war or going over, and I have no regrets from going back and forth to see them. I always remember the first day Rangoon was liberated. There was a big hotel in there, and I had a week's leave, 2 or 3 days leave. We were out somewhere off 50 miles away or so, and we knew the war was coming to an end. And so we had this chance to get away for a few days, and we hitchhiked into Rangoon. Anyway, we had nowhere to, we carried knapsacks with us, and we saw this big old building with big statues on the front of it, and we went in, and there was people everywhere. It's the day after the city was liberated, and there was the Army people, Navy people, everybody in the place, and they had no place to sleep, so they said you can sleep on the floor. So we rolled up in our blankets, and we stayed there for 2 nights, and we went back to camp. And then, of course, after the war ended, we decided to go back to Burma and to the city of Rangoon. And we ended up driving. We got in there at night with our wives, and I couldn't see where we were going or what we were doing, and it was nighttime. And I woke up in the morning, and it was the hotel. Same place that we'd slept on the floor for a couple of nights, trying to find a place to sleep, and the wives were all there with us, and we couldn't believe that we'd been in this. But anyway, it was just a big cement floor and people running around and everywhere. We just rolled up in our blanket and slept there. And here it was the best hotel in town, but I didn't recognize it because when we first landed in there, we flew in, and we ended up going in a back door to the place, and we said, sleep where you want. We were, and then come back to this nice hotel later on. And then we traveled around Burma to various places with our wives and did a lot of that kind of thing. Of course, that's all gone now, but we stopped about, I guess, 3 years ago. But we had about 3 or 4 different reunions more than that, reunions. 3 or 4 visits back to Burma, which we always enjoyed again. And you look at it now, it's a busy, busy, busy city. And I told you the story about going into the dance, which was a beautiful hotel or dirty dance place where we were taking the ladies to. It was nothing but a dump. And we thought it was magnificent. It was great. Beautiful music and lots of girls to dance with. And we'd been in the bush for 6 months at that time or more. I could always remember living in Cumberland there at Christmas time. My dad would, he ran the railway and he hired all these guys. It was his job, or he was in charge of it. And all of a sudden, these Chinese would start walking down the street, coming to my house. And they came into the house. My dad said, didn't even know they were coming. He's a bossy man, you see. And they all bought, nuts and candy and turkeys. We couldn't even refrigerate turkeys. I've seen as many as 12 turkeys hanging up in our basement. Dad was giving them out to people. But this is where the Chinese, they respected him, and they knew he was a bossy man, but he treated them very well. And as a kid, I used to go out with him on a Saturday, and when he was they worked Saturdays in those days, and they all, every one of these Chinese guys knew me, you know. There were probably about 25 or 30 of them. And then there was a big Chinatown there anyway from other people that worked in the coal mines earlier. But anyway, I went away and got married, and went back when I got married to Cumberland to see meet my parents and have a visit with them right after I got married. And this evening, a door knock came. In came 3 Chinese guys that knew me, and they presented me with a check for, I think it was $350. It's a gift to me. Why? They insisted I take it. I didn't want to take their money. I mean, because they knew me as a kid. Remarkable people, you know. I couldn't believe it, but anyway, I finally took it, but I didn't want it, and you know, just to have them remember me as a kid, and that's, you know, from here up. I'd come back from the war, and it was, you know, but they still were living up there, and they have a pipeline. I guess they knew I was coming up there. Yeah, amazing. They used to bring us lychee nuts and all these damn things that were gifts. Just Christmas time, my dad was being the bossy man. That's what they always did. But in those days, it'd be 10 or 12 or 15 of them come down to the house. Turkeys, too. We couldn't eat turkey. Didn't even have proper refrigeration in those days. So. Yeah, I'm here, and I'm trying to do my best to make it, but you're 74 years age, or I shouldn't say 70, 90. It's different than coming out of the Air Force and knowing everything that's been going on in my life. But I've had a good life. I'm very happy about it. I lost my wife. I lost my first wife, really, and the second, and piss on those kids. I've raised them, but they don't want to see me. That's their problem, not mine. I shouldn't say that, but I'm bitter about it because I think I give them every chance. They went to university, and that's the way they want it. So anyway, I'm still here, and my daughter I raised is in North Vancouver, but I haven't seen her. I know where she exactly is. I have her phone number, but I've tried it. She just doesn't want, so that's fine. The rest of the family are all happy about it, so, you know, that's life. Yeah. Anyway, I never regretted being in the Air Force. I never was a pilot, but I was certainly a radio operator and knew a lot about it, and of course repaired all the equipment as well. And I got up the line a little bit anyway. Didn't become a colonel or a lieutenant or anything like that, but you know, it wasn't my idea was to just get in and do what you have to do and get the hell out of there. You know, I wouldn't have wanted to go stay in the Air Force or anything like that after the war. Could have, I guess. No, the Air Force was good to me. I feel I was good to them for what I was doing, and I don't regret it. You know, you had to land somewhere, in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, and my life was Air Force as far as I was concerned. But I hadn't been equipped for it. I came right out of school, and while I wasn't a great student, I passed my grade 12, and I wasn't going to go back to university. I didn't want to go back to school after the war. I had the opportunity of going, but I went to the insurance, or started with the Vancouver Sun and ended up in insurance. But I've always treated people fairly. I try to be friends with everybody I meet. I have no regrets about some of the little things that have happened in my life, but I've always tried to be honest with everybody, and far as I'm concerned, that's the important part. One of the important parts, anyway. You know, I have a daughter coming over. Unfortunately, she's not my daughter. She's my stepdaughter through marriage. She's coming for Christmas. She comes every year here. She politely brings 3 little dogs with her. So that's that part of it. And so that's it. Anyway, that's my life.